Things are
Yeah.
I'll try to hold it down. Sure. A lot of familiar faces, which is good. Some new faces, which is good too. Super excited. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's kind of feels like winter night tonight, cold, dark. Getting ready for the holidays, but we're really, really excited. This is community meeting two. This Essex Elementary building project has been such a long time coming for us. We started, not me personally, but we as the district started planning for it when you formed the district back in 2000. There was always a plan to have 3 capital projects to address each of the buildings, and the order in which they were addressed was the order of need, both physically, in terms of student environment, but also financially, in terms of which buildings would have cost the most to try to keep up and running, if we hadn't addressed them. So we're really happy to finally be at the end of that 3-year building process, multi-year building process to produce 3 new buildings for the district, and we are hopefully a year away from approving an Essex Elementary School. What it is, where it's going to be, what it's going to look like, it's all the work of the next few months and into next fall, when we hopefully will be bringing it before both communities for a vote of approval. To get going tonight, I'm Pam Bowden. I'm the superintendent of Manchester Essex. And like I said, I am super excited to be here and talking about this very, very important project for both our communities. Before we get started, we're not going to spend a lot of time rehashing what we did last meeting, but we do want to make sure everyone knows who's in the room and who's on the project team. So I'm going to ask the folks here to introduce themselves. We have what we call our OPM, or our Owner's Project Manager. They work on our behalf and help to facilitate and coordinate all of the different project team members in the process. So I'm going to give it over to Christina.
Hi everyone, Christina DeLangelo, Project Director with Doran Whittier, and with me tonight is. Hi, I'm Rachel Rincon, Assistant Project Manager.
Jacob Greco, Assistant PM, Doran Whittier.
We also have John Albright with us. He's in the audience. He's our Project Manager as well.
So that's Doran Whittier, our project team. Our OPM, our design team, JCJ, both Doran Whittier and JCJ are returning and worked on the memorial project, but we have Jim.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Lopasta with JCJ Architectural Principal.
And I'm going to walk it over because Jeff, you are a big player in this, and we want everybody to see you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Elliott with JCJ. I'm a lead designer on the project.
And
Pellegrini, Project Manager.
awesome. And then also working on your behalf. So that's our professional team. Working on behalf of the community are your citizens representatives. And that's what we call the SBC, or the School Building Committee. And in this case, it's the Essex School Building Committee. So I'm going to ask everyone on the Essex School Building to stand. I'm a big part of our audience tonight. And I am going to ask them to pass the mic and introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Essex Elementary Principal, Kim Provost.
Hello, you already introduced me, so hi. Kim Field, 4th grade teacher, Essex.
Teresa Whitman, co-chair of the SBC, and I'm on the school committee and an Essex resident.
Gordon Brewster, School Building Committee.
Michelle Cresta, Director of Finance and Operations for the district. Annie Cameron, Essex.
Lisa O'Donnell, Essex.
Charlie Hay, Essex.
Thanks, everyone. And it's important that you get a good look at who they are, because if you have questions about the building project, want to know why we decided something the way we did, or just have input that you want to share informally, you can stop them at the supermarket, you can stop them at the transfer station, knock on their door, not at the dump, and give them your suggestions. They're here working on your behalf, and it's a committee made up of citizen reps from both Manchester and Essex. So please, we're here to help. I include myself in that group. So if you have a question or a comment or a concern, you can email us, you can stop by the office, you can stop us on the street, whatever works for you. So we have professionals are doing the heavy lifting in terms of the design and technical work, and your community reps are advising them on the needs and preferences of the community. And we're having a series of meetings like this through the spring, so we get broader community input on, the design features. So let's get into the process. Christina?
Thank you. So this slide represents our first stage of the project, which is called the preliminary design program phase. That's the stage that we're in currently right now, where we're basically studying the sites themselves and we're evaluating alternatives, which are basically kind of blocks of space based off of the educational program and the space summaries themselves that drive the square footage that we're looking at for the building. This is just a preliminary schedule based off of what we know now in this early stage of the PDP phase, as we like to call it. So we are currently going to be submitting our preliminary design program to the MSBA in January, beginning of January. And then from there, once those alternatives are further evaluated with the building committee, that's when they are refined, and then the building committee selects their preferred option. So that includes the preferred option of site and the building type and the number of students that the building is going to serve. As that preferred option is selected, we then go into the schematic design phase, and that's when the designer architect will take that preferred option, further evaluate it, design it, and ultimately that's where we will set our total project budget for the preferred option itself. That's also where we make our deal with MSBA, which is the Mass School Building Authority. They are the authority that we're working with from the Commonwealth that is providing some funding for the project itself as well. So that's where we lock in what the project will be with the MSBA and our grant as far as how much money the state is going to be providing for the project. From there, then we actually go then to the two different towns. We go to both Essex and Manchester. As you know, we have to pass town meeting. And then it's our understanding that we would then go into debt exclusion votes in both towns as well. So this is a very, again, preliminary schedule just based off of what we know now. This schedule is subject to change as we further evaluate the options themselves. But this is, again, just us at the very beginning of the project and process itself, so it can change over time. You go to the next slide. We talk about, sorry, I just need to get my notes up here. So as far as the MSBA requirements, the Mass School Building Authority, as I talked about, we have to study 3 options. That includes a renovation only, an addition renovation, and new construction. And there'll be multiple iterations of those different options that will be evaluated as the alternatives are developed by the design team. And so the SBC is going to be studying it during this phase, as well as the next phase, which is the preferred schematic report phase. So just want to remind everyone that we are required to study these 3 different options. And then from there, based off of your feasibility study agreement that you have with the state, with the Mass School Building Authority, you have 3 grade configurations that you have to study. This includes a grades pre-K through 3 scenario with 165 students, which is cited in the Essex site itself, with grades 4 and 5 integrated into the Memorial School itself. This will require a school committee program vote and redistricting. It will also require a school committee to vote to amend the regional agreement. This means that Essex and Manchester town meeting vote to approve the regional agreement amendment would need to occur in addition to any approval of the project. So that would need to happen before even going to town meeting, as well as a debt exclusion vote. You would have to go to both towns for the regional agreement to be amended. In the next scenario, we have a grades pre-K through 5 with 250 students cited in Essex. That has nothing to do with reprogramming or a vote or redistricting or an amendment. So it's just that simple option. And then the last grade configuration that we're required to study is a pre-K through 5, which is 515 students cited at the Manchester Memorial site with all Essex and Manchester students in one school. That would also require a school committee to vote and redistricting. It also requires school committee to vote to amend the regional agreement. And that also means that Essex and Manchester town meeting votes would need to be approved to vote the regional agreement amendment as well. So just reminding people, we have 3 enrollments that we're required to study during the feasibility study phase as what you have said with the MSBA during this process and this early phase of the project itself.
So I'm just going to jump in to say an FAQ already emerging is why? Why are we looking at 3 configurations? Why aren't we just picking the center column and moving forward, that seems to be what we had always intended. The school committee got a good deal of input when we were preparing to enter into the feasibility study. And treating that in, we wanted to treat that input fairly and include it for consideration. I think we can all apply some common sense to some of these, but that's just common sense and it's not necessarily data-based. So by including them in the feasibility study and making a little more work for ourselves in this portion of the process, we're going to end up with very well vetted backup data to support whichever one of these configurations we go forward with. So if you take the last slide and this slide together, that means for each of these scenarios, we're going to be looking at a renovation addition, and a potential new construction for each one of these options. The timeline is going to bring us into January, and in the beginning of January, we'll be able to likely start to narrow down and eliminate a couple of these configurations because we have to isolate one to fully develop into the spring. So we're always looking for feedback on this. If you've been following kind of the multi-year capital plan for our major facilities, you know that before we went forward with the Memorial School project, we did an extensive community study that was led by our school committee, by a school committee task force. And we did focus groups and surveys to determine what direction we should go with the elementaries, because that was a logical time to think about consolidation or splitting into upper and lower schools. And resoundingly, that survey came back, that series of focus groups came back, and a white paper was developed asserting that it was the community's will to maintain schools in each of the two towns. That's what the regional agreement calls for, and that work affirmed it. That was 2013. So when we again entered the feasibility study last year, it seemed like an okay time to revisit that. So that's the why this is in here right now. So hopefully by the spring, we'll have identified the pathway and we'll start to see some wonderful designs about what the future will look like. Be good?
Yep. Now it's on to Jim.
All right.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to point out about this particular phase is while we are beginning the study, I want you to all think about the phase we're in through January. So this phase ends in January. We're kind of setting the table. Simply appropriate holiday season, right? We're setting the table. So for the things we will study. So we've been trying to narrow the field and understand we have to present to the Mass School Building Authority those options that will get further study. So that's kind of what this has all been about. I know it seems a little tedious, but that's the way the process works. So the first thing we had to do was to figure out what the table is, what sites are available that might be worth building on or looking at. The School Building Authority really requires you to leave no stone unturned. So what this slide shows is something we covered at the last meeting, we want to revisit. What sites were available? Well, they have to be controlled by the district. So really we're looking at the first the two school sites. That's pretty obvious, right? So Memorial and Essex, those are two sites we'll look at. And then the question comes up that we had to answer, are there any other sites we're looking at? And so this table just shows you that there were 112 sites owned by the town of Essex that would meet the minimum requirement, but then there were only 16 that had enough land to actually build a school, which was 9.75 acres, what we have here. So I narrowed it to 16. Then there were only 7 that actually had access to streets and utilities, so that narrowed it further down. And then there was only one site left that wasn't already used by something else, and that was the site over on Apple Street, which we did talk about at the last presentation. So if we go to the next slide, so we did look at that. So we looked at those slides. We talked to the group that was here, got some good feedback at the last community meeting. Not a lot of it positive, I would say, about Apple Street. A lot of negatives. Went back and looked at that in more detail. Ultimately, the school building committee, through this process, was able to remove Apple Street from further consideration. So now the only 2 sites that will be looked at, so this is new news since the last community meeting. The only 2 sites that will be looked at will be this site where the current school is and the Memorial site for all the reasons that the superintendent just mentioned. So those are the only 2 sites left. Apple Street has been officially voted out. I think if we go to the next slide, Well, I guess we could cover these. I thought that was the chart. So, why would we still look at this one? Well, it's already a school here, right? So there's a lot of opportunity on this site. It already acts as a school. It makes a lot of sense to look at doing work here. If we go to the next slide. Memorial, it's currently a school. This has a lot of constraints. It's pretty built out. When we did the memorial project, we really maxed out that site. So to do any more work there and add to it is going to be a challenge, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then we go to the last one. And this was the Apple Street site where while it was a big open field, there were a lot of things to think about, including road access, sidewalks, utilities, its location next to the former landfill and transfer station, and its former agricultural use. There were a lot of costs that would have been associated with this and unknowns. We go to the next slide. That were documented in this chart. So this is the process that will be used throughout. We'll keep seeing this, which is before the study is started. On the left side, there were a list of criteria developed before the sites were looked at to begin to look at how we're going to evaluate, in this case, the sites. And then the evaluation was done both by the professional team and the school building committee to begin to look at what makes sense. So green being, I've got to get closer to read it to make sure I'm right. Green being advantageous, yellow being neutral, doesn't really matter, and red being not preferable in terms of these various criteria. And if you just look at the amount of red, the amount of green and yellow, it became pretty obvious that there wasn't a whole lot to recommend Apple Street. And the memorial site is going to be a challenge. That's why you see a lot of red there, but we do have to continue with it because it was part of the agreement with the MSBA. So at least through January, that site will be studied. We'll get data to either support or disprove the next section. Go on. What is the next section? Where are we with? So that's kind of where we were as of a couple of weeks ago. Where are we going forward to? So one of the things we're doing now is developing that list of alternatives that will be submitted to the MSBA for their agreement in January, a list of alternatives to be reviewed. So what we're developing now is another chart. This is the bare bones of it. So you're seeing our early work. But again, across the top will be a series of alternatives to be studied. And those will have to do with grade levels and building configuration. And down the left, there'll be a series of criteria that we're in the process of developing with the school building committee that will be used to evaluate these one against the other. And there'll be a big list of criteria that have to do with educational appropriateness, site access, utilities, cost relative one to the other will be in there. There will be all kinds of criteria developed as we move through this that we can then use to evaluate sites. The ultimate goal will be to evaluate all of these, begin to narrow it down further. Some may drop off early in the process in January. Ultimately, by the time we get to, I think it's May.
Yep.
By the time we get to May, the school building committee will need to select what's called the preferred option. It will be the option that we'll move forward with. So that's the timeline. There'll be a lot going on in the spring. So I hope you'll all come back to community meetings in the spring, because that's when these buildings will begin to see which direction this is going. But the idea is ultimately to come up with the scheme, and there's two phrases the MSBA uses that I think are really critical. They're looking for educational appropriateness and cost effectiveness. And we're going to be looking for the sweet spot where those balance appropriately, because they want to make sure that whatever they invest their money in, the towns invest their money in, actually meets your educational program, your educational need, but not doing it at an excessive cost. So that'll be where a lot of the conversation and the evaluation happening in the spring will be. So what are these options? What are the ones we're going to be looking at? So let's start with that. So this is the first option. This is the option that is actually called the code upgrade base repair option. This has to be done for every project. So really what we're seeing here is an aerial view of the current building where we're sitting, set up the way it is now. And what this will be an option that doesn't do any additions to the building. It doesn't do any expansion, and it really doesn't do very much of any reconfiguration inside the building. So it'll be the same rooms and footprint the building has today, but brought up to current codes and maintenance done on the building. So it becomes kind of a brand new 1950s building when you're done with it, but it might be a viable option, which is why we need to look at it. Because if the program fits and it makes sense and the community feels it's the right way to go, this could be an option. So this will be the base, they call it the base option. And I do apologize, you're gonna hear a lot of jargon tonight because that's just the way this process is. So that's one option that we'll be moving forward with through the spring in terms of the study. You go to the next option. Oh, sorry, you already did. So this is another option. This is an addition, right? Yeah, this is the addition. This is an addition renovation option for 165 students, grades K through 3 on this site. So we said K through 3, where the 4th and 5th grade go. Well, they would move over to Memorial under this particular option. But any work needed over there for that is not part of this project. I just want to be clear. The way the MSBA process works is this is a project about the Essex Elementary School. So if students leave here to go to another school, that's great. That could be part of the solution, but it would not be part of the project. You'll be hearing more about that as we move forward. So this would be a small addition. Now, the other thing I want to point out about these drawings, all we're doing is identifying an option to be looked at. The final version may look very different when we study it next spring. This is saying to the MSBA, this is an option that we're going to continue to study. So an addition and a renovation here for K through 3 for 165 students is an option and move forward.
And can I just add too, it'd be good to say that they're not like based off of actual designs.
Yep.
They're just basically building blocks. Right
Yeah,
now.
so all we're showing, thank you, all we're showing are building blocks. We have not gotten to the point of designing anything. We've simply said for 165 students, this is the square footage that's needed based on the work that's been done on the ed program. We'd have to add a box that's about as big as, well, it was the last one, but so on this one, we move forward, sorry. This is another option. It's another addition renovation option. This is a K5. So this is for 250 students at this site. The white box represents the amount of area that would have to be added to this school to accommodate that population. So that's really all you're looking at this point are kind of building blocks. Not final design, but you'll be seeing those in the spring. So another option to look at is K through 5, 250 students here. So you would renovate, you would build some new building. We build an addition, move some kids in, parts of the building that are vacant, we would then go through and start renovating and move students around. So there'd be multiple phases, which is kind of what happened in Memorial, where we built some, move kids in, went back and renovated. So that's another option. We go forward, this is a K3 option for a new building. So we have to look at that as well. So in this case, we would do a smaller new building for K through 3 here on site. It would be brand new. And again, the 4th and 5th grade students from Essex would go over to Memorial. So in this case, you can see the kind of white footprint in the front is the current building. So you would have room, it appears you have room out kind of out back where the playground is and some of the ball fields to build a completely new building for K through 3, 2-story building, then come back and tear this building, move into it, tear this building down and create parking lots and ball fields out front. So this would be another option that we'll be looking at in more detail. We'll be building a smaller building on this site. We go to the next option. Very similar approach. If you blinked, you probably missed it, but the building got a little bigger when we clicked. Same approach. This is for a K5 school. So this would be a full K through 5 school on this site, brand new. Again, built out in the back. Tear down, move in, tear down. In some ways, this is a little easier than what happened at Memorial, where we had to do it in a couple of phases. Here, you could do it very quickly and simply build a brand new building, tear the old building down, redo the site. So this would be a slightly bigger building for K through 5 on this particular site. And then if we look over at the Memorial site, this is the current Memorial School as it exists today. If we go to the next, and it's about 77,000 square feet. So if we look at the next option, this would be a single option of a K through 5 school for 550 students. This would be moving everybody, all the elementary kids over to the Memorial site. To do that, we would need to add a couple more classrooms off where the pre-K is, and then a 2-story wing that kind of connects the bits of the Y, the kind of Y-shaped part of the building. The area where the tennis courts are now would have to be converted into parking. New driveways would have to be put in. It's a pretty, on a tight site already, it becomes much tighter. Some of the things that we're gonna have to look at here would be whether we can even fit this, right? So this, again, this is some building blocks that at this level say, yeah, kind of fits. What we don't know is when we start looking at utilities, grading, drainage, the Conservation Commission requirements that would have to be redone because of the river, the wetlands, all the things that were agreed to in the original building. We're not sure that this will work. So we're gonna have to look at that in more detail, but at this point, all we're saying is it has to be studied. This is one direction to look at. It's possible it will be physically impossible to fit it here. We just aren't that far along. So you're seeing some of the early work. But this would then, we also have to study traffic. When Memorial was built, we were just talking about this earlier, I'll do that here. Before the old Memorial School, traffic used to back up on Lincoln quite a ways back past the middle high school. We put this entire loop in to get traffic off of Lincoln, adding people back, put traffic back out, and then undo what was done. Then the last thing I'll mention about this particular option is that because this is a new school, and the MSBA just invested money in it, when you come back and do this work, clearly you'd be redoing a lot of the site, you'd be tearing up work that was just done and rebuilding it. And then when you're putting an addition in here, you have to tear down parts of the current building to rebuild. So there would be some impact to the reimbursement. In other words, the MSBA would want some of the money back. So that would have to get factored into the total cost for the project, and we'll be helping you to evaluate that. So that would be something different. Over here on this site, that wouldn't happen because there hasn't been work paid for by the MSBA here. On the other side, there would be some reimbursement that they'd be looking for as part of the project. So that's that one. So those are the options. Just to reiterate, these will be going forward in January to the MSBA. We have to check in with them. They have to look at it and say, yeah, along with a lot of other paperwork, that this is, yeah, these are good options for you to move forward with. So we're really just setting the table right now. We haven't studied any of these in any detail, but we will be looking at them and reporting back and working with the school building committee and others starting in January to flesh these out and get data and actual drawings behind them so the communities can make a decision. I guess one thing I would invite before I close is when it's time to comment, ask us any questions about this, and if you have comments about any of these, if you have thoughts that you'd like to share, it doesn't have to be a question, it could be an opinion. That's what we're here for. Please let us know. The reason this isn't supposed to be just us talking at you, we really want to hear from the community, your concerns, your thoughts, your comments, your ideas. If there's things that we should be looking at as we move forward. So I will turn this back over.
So we just wanted to remind people of some important dates coming up over the next couple of months as we've talked about the preliminary design program phase coming to an end at the end of this year, beginning of next year, we're going to be submitting to the MSBA. But in the meantime, we're also going to have our next community meeting at Manchester Memorial to talk with the Manchester community about the project itself. We're going to reiterate the information that we shared tonight, as well as what was shared at the first meeting, so that they understand what the process is and what the project looks like and the different considerations that we have on the table. We'll also have a building tour of the memorial site starting at 4:30, and then the meeting will start at 6 o'clock. So that's on December 9th. From there, we have a couple other building committee meetings that are scheduled through now and the end of this year. We'll further evaluate those alternatives as Jim just went over with you. So our work will be then to submit our preliminary design program to the MSBA after the building committee votes to approve it on January 6th. And then we'll have our next community meeting number 4 back here in Essex on January 28th, where we'll talk about the further evaluation of those alternatives, and we'll have another building tour for that as well. And then I just want, if you go to the last slide, just a reminder that we do have a project website. It's linked directly on the district's website, but also this is the URL, just in case you guys want to write it down or take a picture of it. we encourage you please to go there. There's a lot of information that lies there, and it's a live document that's always being updated with information. It's a great way to contact us, ask us questions. We put all of our building committee meeting minutes up there, any recordings that have been done. So it's a valuable tool, and we welcome you guys giving us any feedback that you have. So just wanted to make sure you know that that's around and available. And we can turn it up for Q&A. Yeah, anyone that wants to speak, please go ahead and come up to the microphone. We just ask that you state your name and your address. Anyone online also, if you would like to speak, you can go ahead and raise your hand.
Thank you. Dr. Lloyd Waits, 2 Moses Lane, Essex. First, I'd like to thank Rita Whitman. She gave me an Essex a great summary of the finance questions that I had. I also wanted to say the link on that website for the email address there actually doesn't work, which is how I got to Teresa in the first place.
Okay.
Yeah. The question that I had was, several years ago when the memorial project started, there was, the submission of it was about $52.2 million. 12.2 million of that was reimbursed by the MSBA. Then at a town meeting in Essex, there was a vote to put in 1/3 of that to be paid by Essex and 2/3 of that to be paid by Manchester. That totals out over this time frame about being, after adjusted for inflation, about $17 million being paid by people from Essex. The scale of the project for the Essex Elementary School seems like it's going to be much smaller than what it was for the Memorial School. So the question that I have is, even though that this project scale is much smaller, and we were told at the town meeting that we would also get some support from Manchester taxpayers when the Essex Elementary School was getting renovated, are we going to be compensated at least the same amount that we had paid out to support the school in Manchester?
Same, I would not say, or think in terms of same amount, but it's going to be the same percentage split, and that's governed by the regional agreement. So any capital project will be split roughly 65-35. So with Manchester providing 65% of the funding because they're 65% of the district. And 65-35 is just a general number that we will get precise based on that apportionment formula.
Okay.
So there's 2 formulas. There's one that we'll deal with the operational budget, and then there's a separate capital formula, but they're still based on about the 65-35 split. So I would be cautious to pick a number, but we can definitely speak to the formula by which it would be apportioned, leaving 35% of the cost, 30% of the cost deducted from the top from MSBA, and the remainder split 65-35.
And 65 being towards Manchester because of the higher population? Is that...
Yes, yeah, and the regional agreement formula.
Okay, so the second question I have, I actually have the regional agreement in my hand.
There we go.
And I could not find this formula in there anywhere, or any representation of that. I might not have missed it, that's why I brought it in case someone could point it out to me, but maybe offline I could talk to you about it. Yeah.
Thanks. I can find your question from, yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to connect with you by phone too and walk you through it, and we can have Michelle help us too as the finance director.
Thank you.
Yep. And for the record, that was the split on the middle high school as well. The capital formula hasn't changed during the life of the district.
And we don't want it to change until we're done. Okay.
Other questions? Comments, ideas?
Do we want to address the question about the size of the building? We don't know what the building will be, but the building will be appropriate for this community. So,
Yep.
And the programming that the district offers. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great question to talk about the size of the school. So the process, again, very much like at Memorial, the process is a process that the MSBA guidelines dictate. It's probably a strong word, but there's a process we follow. And the process begins with an educational plan, which has been developed by the superintendent and the district and teachers and others, and is in the process of being discussed with the school committee. Educational plan lays out what you teach, how you teach, what the expectations are for programming. And so that's something that was started with the memorial, and it's been updated and refined and reflects the current state of where you are in terms of teaching and learning. So that's step one. Step two then is to work with the template, they call it, at the MSBA, to figure out for the enrollment. So as we've seen, like what's up here now, this is 250 students, that's the projected enrollment. We develop jointly, again, with the school building committee, the size of the building based on the enrollment. That's what drives it, is the enrollment of 250 students and the programs you have. So you'll see different square footages here. So for instance, this K-5 school right now, we're projecting it would be just under 74,000 square feet. Memorial's about 77,000 square feet. The differences have to do with, in some ways, with just the way the programs have evolved. So less students, going to be a slightly smaller building, but it's not a linear kind of a development. So I just want to play a little mental gymnastics here. So if you think about a school, there are certain things that every school has, right? Like a cafeteria, a gym, offices, art room, music room. Every school has those, whether they have 200 kids or 500 kids. So the building is going to be a certain base size, and you're going to add classrooms. So I just want to caution people to start doing math with taking square footage and student population and thinking there's a direct correlation. There's correlation, but there's certain fixed sizes. A gym is a gym is a gym. It's not going to get any smaller because you have less kids. They still want to play basketball on the same length. Cafeteria is going to be about the same size. The kitchen is going to be about the same size. You still need office space, special education space. So really the only big difference is going to be the number of classrooms you have. So there will be some differences there. So this building will be smaller than Memorial, but we also know the construction costs have risen since Memorial. So it's a very complicated, they probably want to go to cost, but it's tied to it. Because I think when we have questions about the building size, clearly I'm quite sure you're immediately assuming, well, it's a smaller building, it must be cheaper. May not be. Just spoiler alert. Costs have gone up. Construction costs have gone up since pre-pandemic pricing, which is what was done on Memorial. Plus, construction costs just go up all the time. That's just the reality of the world as things move forward. So we don't know yet what this will cost specifically. That will be part of the conversation in the coming weeks. We'll be doing multiple estimates, multiple lessons of what the various options will cost, because clearly cost and size and square footage will be part of the evaluation. Because just to go back to what I said earlier, cost effective, educationally appropriate. So those things have to balance. So this building will be smaller than Memorial. We don't know how much smaller because it's going to depend on which of the options. But for each option, you'll see a square footage. The biggest, I think this is the biggest, right? The 73.
On this site, yeah.
Yeah, on this site, this is the largest of the options. The K3 is smaller. So that will be part of it. Is that a question or not? Yeah, okay.
Jen, can I just add? So he mentioned that construction costs have come up, which is true, but also so has MFPA caps on construction and caps as far as what they reimburse for. So they understand that the market is increasing and so is construction. So they have increased their overall effective reimbursement rate for certain things like construction, for sites, for FF&E and technology. So I just want everyone to be aware, since when the Memorial project was done, it was based off of a certain number that MSB would reimburse for. It has now since then gone up because they understand that it needs to be reflective of what's happening in the market as well.
Can you go to the slide that I think was AO, which is K-5 using this building? And then the question I have that adds on to the size of the building. This building housed 450 kids at least, maybe more. 25, 30 kids in a classroom. I was one of them. And there's one with an addition. Can you explain to me why, if we had 450 kids and you're only going to 250, why we need to do an addition instead of renovating what we have. And if it's all to do with the minimum sizes of an art room, if you can explain that.
Yeah, sure, that's,
There's 200 kids.
that's a really good question, and it's a question that we face in every community when you're looking at older schools. So, first off, I just want to remind everybody that we will be looking at just a renovation as one option, so that we'll be understanding what that's going to look like. So we're going to look at that option with no addition and what you can fit. The biggest change is when you look at the education program, as it's currently being, as all districts, I'll talk bigger picture. If you look across the Commonwealth, in fact, across the country, the way education is delivered today is very different than when these schools were built. So a couple things, class size is smaller, so there's less, what's your class size?
18 to 22.
18 to 22 students per classroom, so that, you start with that, you need more classrooms, right? Then, when I was in elementary and junior high school, we had 30 kids in a class, that was just kind of normal. So if you just begin to do that math, you need more classroom space. There is a significant, and superintendent will be able to speak to this in detail, but significant more special education programs that need rooms. So there's a lot more services being provided to students than when this building was originally built. So you need those kinds of spaces. There are additional programs being taught in terms of STEM and maker spaces and robotics and computers, even at younger ages. So you need spaces for those kinds of activities. There's just an increased amount of pressure on the buildings to provide certain types of space. And then there are other things like the gym right now is undersized. So it could be reused, or you could build a new gym, and you could build a new gym and reuse this one for something else, build inside of it and renovate it. But when you look at the template that's provided by the MSBA and then you modify it to accommodate the actual things you're teaching, what's actually happening today and looking to the future, you end up with a larger footprint than the building is right now. The other thing about the MSBA process is they're asking us to look out to the future. So your enrollment and your programming, they want us to design a 50-year building, right? So they want you to come back in 15 or 20 years and say, hey, we need more, we need you to pay for this again. So they want to make one investment, because they have a lot of districts in the Commonwealth that need help and only so much money to go around. So they're looking to make sure that they invest wisely. So does that help a little bit in terms of the answer to the question?
I still can't get my mind around the 200 less students. We have to build a bigger building. It boggles my mind. And I don't usually ask a question I don't know the answer to. This one, I heard what you said, and if we got 18 to 22, and we used to sit 25 to 30 kids in a classroom, and we have half that many people, it doesn't make sense that we still have to expand when we have all this extra space now with 12 kids in a class in some of these classrooms.
Okay, I hear you. When I believe on the website we'll have the templates posted, right? Yeah. So you'll be able to look at the spreadsheets that list all the classrooms and all the rooms that are in that number. And those will be on the website, so you can dive into those and be happy to look at them in more detail with you. So there is a template, they call it, it's an Excel spreadsheet that it'll list all the rooms that are in the building currently with their sizes. And then there's another column, and there's one for each of these options, each enrollment, that'll show the spaces that are needed to provide the education currently. So you'll be able to do a deep dive into that if you want. Hopefully that'll help when you see the actual numbers, how we got to there, because it's a very detailed process that you go through to do that. Will this be the final number? Probably not. This is the starting point. They generally go down a little bit from this. As we do the design work, we find efficiencies, we find ways to make rooms do different things, or there may be conversations where you can combine programs into a single space, or you don't need two rooms to do something you thought you did. So it'll go down a little bit, not a lot, but it typically gets a little bit more efficient. This is the starting point. But I certainly recommend you go to the website and grab those spreadsheets and then come back with more questions. We're happy to sit with you.
And then I'm going to ask one more question, and it's only because I'm a skeptic. Does your firm or the design firm make more money if we build a new building versus renovating the old one?
Not really. No, it's not.
I mean, what's the incentive, I guess?
Yeah.
Is there an incentive for you to push one project
No,
versus another to the community?
no, that would be unethical to do that anyway, but there's no incentive, no. No,
Can I just ask a clarifying point about the enrollment numbers or the estimates? Do those include pre-K?
we should have said that earlier, that's a great question. The enrollment number does not include pre-K.
That's K-5.
That's K, yeah.
But that building will house pre-K?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. That's a really important distinction. Pre-K is part of all of these, but because of the way the MSBA calculates enrollment, they don't include it in the enrollment. So the enrollment is only K, in this case, K through 5. It starts at K and goes up to whatever it says, but there is pre-K in all of these.
And does that include, I know that we have some separate special education programs that have been moved to Memorial due to the handicap accessibility here. Does this number also include moving those programs back here?
Yes, and it includes lower and upper grade level classrooms. So for RISE and ACE, the assumption is they would come back here.
But that number, the 250, includes those students, or it just includes the projections of?
It doesn't include, it's just based off the demographic projections of Essex resident students into the future. Yeah. Lisa. We're here first.
I wanted to address John's question about the design firms getting an incentive.
Do you mind paying them?
Yeah, just as a perspective that the school building committee made up of Essex and Manchester residents is really the policy board. We make the decisions. The designers give us options, they give us input, they give us feedback. But when it's time to make decisions, it's the school building committee who is voting to make decisions. So it is residents making those decisions.
And we have the safeguard of the OPM, which is here to ensure that the designer is working to our specifications, which is the building committee specifications. And then you have the layer of the MSBA. And the entire MSBA process is regulating what we're doing, which is why we file an ed plan and why we have to go before them, or this team has to go before them for checks on each of the steps of the process to ensure that what they're designing is in our interest and not theirs. And it's meeting the specifications that the committee has laid out for them. So there's a lot of checks and balances to ensure that someone isn't proposing something for their interest and not the communities. Thank you for being patient.
We live at 57 Western Ave, right next door. So my question is on the option that shows the new building, how close to the property line, how much of a buffer is there?
I don't know the exact answer to that right now because we haven't really designed anything yet and it's within the zoning boundaries, but I'm hesitant to even say an answer because this doesn't represent an actual building footprint yet. It just represents an area that we can look at building. So we don't have an answer, but we certainly will have an answer in the spring and be happy to have more conversations around that. We just don't know. I mean, it sets back over whatever is anticipated for zoning, but I don't know the exact number yet because we're not at that level of detail.
So I want to address your question about what schools were like. I'm 61, so I know that when I was in school, there was a classroom for every grade, an art room, a music room, a home ec room, a gym, right? We deliver instruction, and I've just learned this from being on the school committee. Instruction is delivered so differently than it was when we were in, I'm not assuming, I'm assuming you're
older than you.
okay. You look 30. But you know what I mean? It's delivered differently. And I wonder if it would help for you to come and look at the classrooms and just see how they're set up now, because they're not, we had them all in rows, right? And now that the classroom is so different than it was when we were younger, that it would be helpful for people who live in town to know how instruction is so different, how you integrate students that may not have been in your classroom before. They're now in the classroom. So how do they learn? How do you deal with, I had a couple of fidgety boys and they have ways of kind of helping students get through the day so that they can focus and learn. And the classrooms really reflect that different kind of instruction. And I think one of the great things about our district is that, you know, we've always had people coming to meetings and saying, oh, you know, this special ed school does so much better. And the reality is that our teachers are much better trained, I think, than some of the private schools that have always been thrown in our face because they're required to. They're required to have integrated classrooms. So I don't know if Kim could actually talk to you at some point, just show you what the classrooms look like so that you can see kind of how different the space needs are now.
I was here for the first meeting, I
Yeah.
came early, I went around on the tour, I saw some classrooms that had 12 students in it. I saw some that had more than that, and yes, I had kids and they went to school, so I saw how they were taught, so I understand what you're saying, but 200 students less, 25 in a classroom, even when they were big, that's 8 classrooms, that's the whole other wing.
Yep.
And you're telling me that we can't do what is needed to be done in this footprint because you're adding on to it. It'd be nice to have extra space and things, but do we need it with half the kids? I don't necessarily, I'm thinking about it, but I also want to, while I'm still have the floor again, an opinion about moving this to Manchester. And I was here when we voted for this regionalization. I was against it, and it was mostly because I thought it should be on district land, not on Manchester land or Essex land, but the district owned land. And now we've built $17 million worth of middle school, and I don't even know what the number is on the high school in somebody else's town. And now we're going to be hoping they pay their 65% share on a renovation, on an addition, on a tear down, or whatever it is we're going to do. But my point about being here in the beginning, they swore up and down would not take the younger kids out of here. And they didn't say 3rd grade. You know, I believe it was at least 4th.
Mm-hmm.
And I was upset when they went below 6. 6, what is it, 6, 7, and 8, or 5, 6, 7, and 8 now?
6, 7.
6, 7, and 8 is in Manchester, so, Essex needs to have a footprint. And the young kids should be here. They should not be bused over to Manchester for convenience sake, money's sake, or any other sake. Redo the building, that's my opinion. Make it right. Fix everything that needs to be fixed, the roof. I was here also when it was renovated. I moved the library with Jeff Jones, town moderator, from that little closet over there to the new library, every single floor. So it's time to fix the building, is what my opinion is. I mean, I don't know how much more clearly I can say that. Thank you.
I think, go ahead, Lisa.
The scenarios where, you move students to Memorial requires a revote on the regional agreement. And we're doing this because of the MSBA process and checking all the boxes. I think everyone in this room knows that that's not gonna fly. Revising the regional agreement is not gonna happen if it means sending our students over there when the whole purpose of the regional agreement, for one of the main things, was keeping our students here. So that's just a sort of a reality check from my perspective, but it would, that's not gonna happen without a town vote.
Is that the feedback from the committee too, that everybody on the committee feels that way?
I'm speaking for myself and more from my experience and seeing how people feel about it, but I don't see that logically, realistically happening.
Yeah.
Can you come in too after I spoke to the why we have this on here? I had recapped that in 2013, we had made a conscious decision when we were trying to figure out which elementary school had to be dealt with first. The school committee undertook a large community study to find out which direction to go in. And resoundingly, the result of the study, focus group survey, and the general outcome was that we needed to retain the 2 community schools. There was great commitment about that. when we were beginning the feasibility process, the school committee was getting inputs from members of town boards about revisiting those conclusions because 10+ years had passed. We were embarking on a large scale project, which was going to be costly to both towns. And we shouldn't just assume that something that was valid in 2013 is still valid now. With that in mind, we did present that information to MSBA as a concern we were hearing from both communities that we should be investigating this, and they built it into our feasibility plan for us so we could properly go through a vetting process of these ideas. So the school district has always been very clear on what we thought our mission was, and I think we're just running a check on it now through this process. So we're not coming into this with the intent of moving toward that. I think I would say we're trying to prove the original assumption.
I'll share that, from the school committee level, because we just discussed this 2 nights ago. The assessment right now, so first of all, if there were to be a change to the regional agreement, it would be initiated by the school committee throughout the process. There, at this point, is no compelling reason that the school committee sees for doing so. So right now, educationally, programmatically, for social emotional wellness, for the communities involved, no, our committee, the school committee, is not inclined to make a move on that right now, but we're leaving open the possibility that through this process, there may develop through this unearthing of all of this information, some major, financial benefit, but it would have to be so strong as to outweigh all of these other things. And so that's where the school committee is right now, and that does make a difference as well. We would have to initiate that, other than an extreme circumstance. But the SBC is in the capacity right now of doing the unearthing and evaluating what's being presented to us. As the technical team does the unearthing, evaluating what's being presented. Does that make sense?
John, I want to tie both of your concerns together and point to this schematic here. I think in good faith, when people were proposing the merger of all the students into Memorial, the assumption was because of our current enrollment status, so we're half of what we used to be, right? Everyone would fit in the building proper. They don't fit. We tried to explain that they wouldn't fit because of all of the reasons that we've been discussing tonight. So you're really looking at, Jim, what are you estimating the size of this?
That's 41.
Plus all of the other building modifications that would have to be done. So I think, again, back in good faith, if everyone fits and maybe you have to tweak some things here and there to make it work for kids and you're at the $10 million solution, that might be material enough to say, well, maybe the school committee feels like they have to examine this and see where the community is. I think if we let the data drive our decision, we're going to have within a month or two, some pretty clear direction on where this should go.
And just to follow up, every time we ever do something like this, they're the people that show up at the end of the process and are like, you never looked at it. So now we're looking at it, we'll have data to back up what our guts are. I mean, I think we can say our gut is telling us at this point kind of where we would go. But you have to have the data to back it up to say, I'm glad you asked that question because we do have the data to back up where we're going. So it's sometimes it seems a bit silly, but we have to do silly because
Check all the boxes.
yes, because inevitably somebody from either both towns is going to be questioning where we've been working.
So we have someone online. Alba, why don't you go ahead and speak, please? You just have to unmute yourself.
Thanks. I had to figure out how to do it. Can you go back to a map that shows either one of the Essex properties? All of them, the question I have 3 questions, but the ones, I just rather look at the Essex map. So first of all, a comment. The camera is in a lousy position. I see Annie's eyebrows and above and nothing below. That's just a comment on the camera. And so then on the map, I see two things that I'm questioning. One is the wetlands section. Is it technically real wetlands or is it poor runoff that's causing it to be considered wetland? And you don't have to answer that now. It's just a thought I had because I'm like, is it real wetlands? It seems like it's, yes, we all know that that field gets wet, but why? And then the real question I have is in this map, we have classroom. Everybody understands classroom. Special project and community, I'm a little bit unclear of. I mean, I can guess based on my years on the school committee, but can somebody define what those are so that the public understands what a special area is, what a project area is, what a community area is?
Sure. In terms of, let me just answer your wetlands first. We're in the process of getting wetlands mapping done. Right now, we're relying on whatever's on the town maps that indicate wetlands, but there's wetlands mapping and soil scientists looking at it. So we will have for both sites, well, actually Memorial, we know because we just did that project. But for this site, we'll actually have the wetlands map confirmed. So we will know whether they are truly regulated wetlands or not. I hope that answers that question. Right now, generally we know they're there and it's based on readily available town mapping. Yeah, so the categories you see up there, classroom, special project, community, administration, arts and music, those are broad categories that we took from that very detailed template that we were talking about before, trying to group things together. So classrooms are classrooms. Specials are teaching spaces that may be different. They could be special education, they could be art, music. There are a variety of when I say classroom, we're thinking of classrooms as a core classroom, a kindergarten classroom, a first grade classroom, a second grade classroom. If it's not that, like it's art, music.
Art and music is green.
So art music is green, the
Special ed intervention is.
Special ed intervention, various programs. There's a variety of programs the district offers that end up in the special area. Projects.
Project rooms.
Yeah.
SD, yeah.
Projects, we have project rooms, so there are rooms for STEM and STEAM instruction, maker spaces, or space singular in the project. That's what that would be. So that would be for out of classroom instruction to go do hands-on learning. Community is a broader topic. We're not showing a community space. It's space used by the community typically. The gymnasium, cafeteria. The space we're standing in right now is labeled as community because it's a space that could be open to the community after hours or maybe used by the community for town meeting for after hours community. So this is a way of us kind of categorizing that. The administration is offices. That's the main office. So they have any other administrative office space. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Lisa.
Having sat on the Memorial School Building Committee as a resident of Essex, I just know that throughout the process and also the high school too, I wasn't involved in that, but I just know that Essex Elementary has always been last and we've always been promised essentially, I would call it parity. We all know we're gonna have a smaller school, but what we want is to have the same educational opportunities for our students in our littler school the same that Manchester has in Memorial School. So that's just to make the point that we want to make sure that the educational quality that can be provided in the school is going to be comparable to Memorial. And I think it would be helpful for people in Essex to go take the tour of Memorial, which is on December 9th. When you guys introduce that, the next community meeting on December 9th in Manchester at Memorial, it kind of sounded like it's for Manchester residents, but it's really for our district residents. And I think it would be very valuable for people in Essex to now go tour Memorial with the mindset of what will our school look like to be able to offer these same amenities. So we don't want to have a school that doesn't give our students the same preparation to enter the middle and high school on the same footing as Manchester students. So I just want to sort of keep that in mind. And then I had a question, and I don't know whether it's Pam or Michelle or who would address it, but I know during the process for Memorial and talking about funding and all that, one of the themes was that, as we sort of ramp up and start to finance and borrow for Essex, we're gonna be looking at the high school, middle high school coming down. Is that still a thing? Is that, you know where I'm going, Sam?
I know where you're going, and it's funny because I've been running our memorial project timeline against this timeline, and we are much earlier in the long-term financing conversation this time around than we were with Memorial. We kind of started it in the spring after heading into the vote. Long story short, 2034 is the end year for the middle high school, for the debt. I think there's interest, and we've already planned a pre-planning meeting to begin thinking about creative ways to, let me say this, understanding what the towns are thinking of and what they're looking for in terms of creative ideas to manage the multiple debts that the towns are carrying, so that we can then work with the financial advisor to create a timeline that takes into account 2034, anything else the towns have on their plate, and see what options we have to try and keep the burden as light as possible for everybody. 2034 will be the half-life of the middle high school, so I think when we close this process, we'll have to start to think about what that means in terms of smaller scale projects in the future, but I think you just want to keep it in mind.
To follow up this is a non-financial person asking. I always had the impression that the debt sort of declines. It doesn't just drop off. It sort of declines as you go. Is that the thing?
It is a thing, and I was looking at the chart, so Michelle will be a better person to explain the chart. It does go down.
Yeah, the debt doesn't necessarily decline. The principal payments remain the same throughout the life of the bond. It's the interest that does decline. So you'll see a small amount that goes down, but most of the repayment is the principal.
So it's different than your home mortgage where your principal and interest always add up to the same number. So you're saying
You could structure it that way. It's not structured that way with the current bond right now.
In the bond refinancing, I think we had done a middle.
Yes.
So we did realize some savings along the way. Other questions, thoughts?
Stan, excuse me here. I had a question asked of me, or in conjunction with a comment from the first community meeting. And I think you sort of addressed it, Jim, with your discussion of the base straight code upgrade here at EES. Could you speak just a little more to that in the attitude of why are we even bothering with MSBA? Can't we just fix what needs to be fixed or do the things here at maybe a smaller scale? Does it have to be a whole full thing? Do you see where I'm going with that? Do we to stick with MSBA's process guidelines, requirements, and all of those things? Would it be less expensive to just do straight code upgrades based on what we want to do here? And do you see any other districts doing that sort of thing, or just speak to that a little bit, because it's a question I have.
Okay, I'll try. I'm not sure I fully understand, but we'll work on it. Certainly the advantage of the MSBA process is you will be getting reimbursement towards the cost.
Yeah.
When we do working with the OPM and two cost estimators, they'll be doing independent estimates of every option and then comparing those, so we have good estimates. That's the way the process works. You'll be getting costs for everything, so you'll see what the cost would be to just renovate the building, so we'll know that. We'll then be able to compare that cost with what any of the other options would be cost to the district, to the taxpayer. So the way it'll get broken down is ultimately there'll be a cost to the taxpayer, right? That's what this ultimately, because there'll be the overall cost, there'll be what your reimbursement is from the MSBA, and then there'll be the cost to each town based on the apportionment. And you'll be able to then compare, if we just did the renovation, we spent, let's say the renovation costs $10, right? So if we spent $10, the renovation cost $10 and we wanted to do that, the taxpayers would pay all $10 because if we did it on our own, the MSBA would give us nothing. If we look at one of the other options and after we get the MSBA reimbursement, it'll cost us $12, well, then maybe the $10 will look like a good deal. What I see in most communities, what we see in most communities is after the MSBA reimbursement, the cost for the bigger project might be $8 to the community, which is less than 10. That's typically what we've seen. Can't say it will be the case here. That's why we got to do the work. That's why we have to look at it and see. Typically, when you factor in the reimbursement, because it's fairly significant, generally you get more for less dollars than if you do it on your own. That's generally what we've found. That may be different, and that's why we're going to do the work. We're going to look at it seriously to see what makes the most sense. And the MSBA will go with whatever, as a community, as a district, for your representatives, you decide to do as the right. They're going to look at it. They're going to make sure that you're making decisions that are a good use of their money. But if, you can go whichever direction. Does that answer the question?
That answers the question precisely what I was looking for, and though I did not explain my question very eloquently, so thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So that's
So the MSBA has certain requirements, is what I think you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And if we say, to heck with MSBA, we're not gonna follow your requirements, we're gonna do our own thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're still saying there might be cost saving if we follow them, get what we want, and it still could go below the $10. Is that what you're telling me?
So, yeah, let me see if I can paraphrase what you, let me see if I can answer this. What we've seen is in most communities, in fact, I can't think of a community that hasn't gone this way. When you follow the MSBA process and do a project to renovate and add or build a new building, it almost always has been less expensive to the town than if they did something else on their own, and got no reimbursement at all, because there's significant reimbursement coming. That's typically what happens and that's what you're going to be looking at ultimately is, yes, there's the total cost, but the real thing I think you're going to want to understand is how much do the taxpayers in the two towns have to pay? That's what we're paying. That's what the impact of that is. So depending on the reimbursement amount, and part of our job is to get you as much reimbursement through the design process as we can. And we'll be working with the OPM and in future meetings, we'll be explaining that. But that's why square footage is important. So we get as much. So for instance, at Memorial, we said before, Memorial was a 77,000 square foot building. The MSBA reimbursed 74,000 square feet of that, I think, because they have certain limits on what they'll do. They looked at your program and said, yeah, that's how much space you need. And you got a lot of reimbursement for the square footage being built over there. That was definitely cheaper than if you had just renovated the Memorial School on its own. We did that math back then. And it was a better deal for the taxpayers to do the project the way you did it than if you had just gone in on your own nickel and renovated that whole building to bring it up to code and replace systems. Yeah.
And that math is coming.
And we'll be sharing that math in the coming meetings and weeks, yeah.
To follow up on that, if a town was to renovate without MSBA money, would that jeopardize future MSBA money way down the line because they did not meet the standards that they were looking for back now?
I can't say no to that, but I will say though that you have made an agreement as a district to enter into a feasibility study for the MSBA with the understanding that you want a project and that you want funding from the state. And MSBA has over hundreds of schools submit statement of interest to ask for funding and assistance for districts, towns, and cities across the Commonwealth. And you were accepted right into that program. So they understand that there is a need for a school here, some sort of school, whatever school option that ends up being. But you've made an agreement and understanding that you needed assistance. And so you have a contract currently with them to study this phase. So the understanding to the MSBA is that the towns and the district had agreed to appropriate some funds for us to do this phase right here to study this. Is also the understanding that you're willing to move forward with some sort of project. Because they don't want you to get to that point where you're not on board to then support whatever project that the, district is trying to move forward with. And so that's why they're trying to spread the money around. And if you decide to leave their program, there's a lot of other schools that literally cannot proceed without funding from MSBA.
Yeah.
And I've worked in certain districts where if they didn't have reimbursement, there is no way that they would be able to do a school project.
Good, thank you.
I'd offer to that MSBA is really. It's bureaucratic, we have to follow a lot of rules, but it also is providing us a really solid process to go through, because if the district pulled out and took on renovation on its own, then we have to come up with local mechanisms to manage the inputs of both communities, because it still needs to go through the same funding mechanism of having the district take on a construction project, which we would have to manage on our own, hire our own project managers, designers, and construction team, but run that through a process that doesn't exist just yet. So I think there's a cost to that as well. In bringing both towns locally to agreement without any guidelines. We have guidelines we have to follow now, and I found that tremendously helpful to the process when we went through the memorial project. But it's a little bit of a gift. A lot of those.
So again, just a reminder, December 9th is our next community forum that's going to be held at the Manchester Memorial School. Townwide meeting mailers have been sent out to both Essex and Manchester to remind you of that meeting. There will be remote or hybrid, so if you want to join online, you can, or you can come in person. But Lisa's comment was it would be great for you to all come and do the tour ahead of it, so that way you can see what the Memorial School looks like if you've never been there. And then the tour will start at 4:30 and then the meeting will start at 6 o'clock. We fixed the button for entering in your comments or questions on our website, just as we were fiddling over here. So it works. If you have any comments, questions, please submit it. We're happy to answer. We're happy to hear your feedback. We want your feedback.
Is the tour a continuous tour or just one at 4:30 and then it's over?
Continuous.
Okay.
Whenever you get there, somebody will be there.
All the way up till 6.
Yep. Any other questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.